Welcome back to Faith, Frauds, and Falsehoods, where we explore various cults and religions of the world. Tonight, we're discussing yet again the International Churches of Christ, aka the International Christian Church. Now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help others find us.
Yeah, and before we get started, Matt, let's make sure that we remind everyone these are our opinions. They don't necessarily represent those of our churches or employers. So, where do we go tonight, Matt?
Well, tonight we're going to talk about the social talking points, the social issues. I think we wrote it
social issues, the stories,
Yeah. Now, we've discussed a lot of things already that kind of applies to this. There's a few things that we want to discuss that we haven't really brought up much before. There's a few points here I'm super excited to talk about that a listener has shared with us. And they would like to remain anonymous. And we're gonna go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like we're getting a little desynced here. But I wanted to go ahead and point out, right, this is something that we should probably share, that we've created an email address, stories@faithfraudsfalsehoods.com. So if you've got a story cult, if you grew up in a cult, if you've been a part of a cult and you want to share your story, maybe we'll take advantage of it and use it in our social episodes. So shoot us your stuff. We'd love to read it.
Yeah, we'd like to hear your opinions too. I mean, we're kind of reporting from the outside and we're reading a lot of opinions of others. And as we say in the very beginning, we're kind of, excluding our own opinions onto this a little bit here. So hearing from somebody who's actually been inside some of these things is quite helpful. And so we really appreciate that. And so this time we had somebody reach out and they'd like to remain anonymous. Cause a lot of times when you're involved in a group like this, there's a lot of hurt and stuff that happens.
Right. Yep.
And so I totally get that. So we're going to honor their request for that, but I'm going to bring up several points they brought up, including they pointed out some things that we kind of maybe didn't make clear enough.
Right.
And we super appreciate that too.
Absolutely.
I understand that I'm not wrong, but Bryan here is often wrong about things.
That I am.
He may feel differently about my first statement there. But, look, we're human too. We're not perfect. We're not telling you we're biblical scholars. We're approaching this from a Christian's perspective, but we're also flawed sinners. That's what first made us a Christian in the first place, right?
That's right.
And we don't know everything. We kind of only see what we see from the outside. And this is kind of one of those groups too, that there's multifacets in this. There's kind of multiple dimensions, and I need to quit rambling because we're supposed to do these in under 30 minutes, but
we're only at 3.
There's just a lot to it. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to talk about.
Nice. All right. So where do we start?
So I want to start by, I was just doing a little research into the ICC because we talked about the ICOC and eventually became the ICC. And we'll talk some more about that change there when we go on. But one of the first things I come across was the ICC has an app, the First Principles app.
Okay.
For Bible study.
I think I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
Did you try to download the app and check it out?
No.
Well, I wanted to do so.
Oh.
However, it is not open to the public.
Ah, okay.
It is behind a paywall. They want you to pay an annual license fee to use this app. The money from this goes to Mercy Worldwide. Remember how we discussed that was kind of their outreach side? Kip had formed an outreach organization in the ICOC, and then when he started the ICC, he formed a new outreach organization, kind of just mirroring the same sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay, so it was Hope Worldwide.
Right, and then the new one is Mercy Worldwide.
Yep. Okay, all right.
He kind of redid those things he had done in the past. Well, there is a Mercy McKean scholarship. Extensively, it's to honor his father. I also didn't learn until I read about the scholarship that Kip McKean was a second. He has the same name as his dad. He's Kip McKean the second. Thomas actually is their name. Kip is the nickname. And we did talk about how his dad was in the Navy and such.
Right.
And so this is a scholarship that's in the name of his dad. And so that made me think more about scholarships. What does this go? Where does the money go? Because that's some questions they've had.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not real clear.
Yeah, that's
There's a lot about that. A lot of, non-transparency in the organization. Anyways, I just want to bring that up first because we're both into tech. I thought it was very interesting. They have this Bible study app, but it's behind a paywall. And they want you to pay for it to go to the scholarship. And that's
right.
We talked about tithing and how they're really heavy on tithing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that somebody wrote into us about was that we had said that they require a tithing of at least 20%. And that's one of those things. The others I have read said that there's at least 20% tithing plus a tithe above your tithe, in the year as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this person's experience, it was at least 10%, and then the tithe above your tithe.
Right. And that's kind of part of the that mainline Church of Christ setup where everything is very, very congregational. So even though we talked last time about Kip having this ultimate authority, where he was really the one making the decisions, I suspect that they continued to have some of that congregational words. Wow, Matt, my brain just completely stopped. Autonomy. Thank you.
Some differences in the different congregations,
right? And so individual congregations may have done over and above what this listener kind of reported, but
they may have. And I will tell you something else that I have read and heard from former members is that with their hierarchical leadership that they had set up,
mm-hmm.
if the people under you did not tithe to the expected amount, you were yourself expected to make up for that.
Right.
So I could very well see how somebody would pressure the people under them to tithe even more. So to either make up for what you had to make up for so that you don't come up short and have to make up for yourself. So if the leader above you is asking for 10%, you ask your people for 20 so that if you at least have the 10 to cover.
Right.
But see, that's an example of what's wrong with this group, and that's this strict control.
Yep.
It breeds
Deception.
bad things, deception, and people who meant well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a lot of people involved in this who meant very well and wanted to serve the Lord fully.
Yep.
But because of the leadership, were led to do it poorly.
Yep. Well, I mean, we see that, I can't believe I'm going to say this, right? But we see that in the Pharisees, right, in the Bible. Several of them, guarantee you, wanted to do the good thing, the right thing. But they were being pressured from above and doing things that weren't exactly the right thing, which is why Jesus called them hypocrites, right? I mean, Paul was a Pharisee among Pharisees, right? He knew he was doing the right thing going to Damascus to murder people. And yet he wasn't. Right? He had taken these orders and taken this direction from someone above him, taught him this thing, and it was just plainly wrong.
Just plainly wrong.
Yep.
And it's funny because one thing that I didn't come across until somebody pointed out to us, which is interesting to me because now I'm coming across it everywhere, was this thing called the Henry, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, the Henry Crete letter.
Yeah.
How would you pronounce that name, you think?
Crete, maybe? Crete?
That's what I was thinking, Crete.
Yeah.
This letter in 2003, and the reason I'm kind of jumping ahead, I know you see my points, I have some other points I wanted to make first, but I'm jumping ahead because you brought up the Pharisees. Because Henry Crete also brought up the Pharisees. I'm just going to read you a couple of quick points from his letter. Now, I can't read the whole thing. The thing was massive.
Yeah.
Okay. And we could probably do a whole episode on just this letter, and maybe we need to. But just a couple of quick points he was making. Now, this letter was written to the other leadership. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Henry Crete had his Paul moment, his Saul becomes Paul moment, where he realized, oh wow, we are doing wrong. We're horribly in sin, and this whole thing is wrong.
Right.
Here's some things he said. He says, my criticisms and concerns are not merely about one's personal style of leadership. It cannot be dismissed as the actions of a few rogue leaders or overly zealous, but immature evangelists. For the most part, we as a movement have succumbed to several evils that are systemic and are bitterly difficult to admit, let alone see our way out of. What is essential to our success is this: not only must the sins and abuses be radically repented of, and there are many, but also, more importantly, the structural evils that help foster them be theologically exposed and denounced. And again, I don't want to read all these, but he makes these really heavy points.
Yeah.
Our entire religious movement, our culture and belief system, our spiritual abuses, the way we train our Christians, and our control mechanisms are so widespread and invasive that unless they are officially, uniformly, and publicly denounced, they will continue on forever. Sweeping evils and bad theology can only be rectified by exposing and opposing.
Yeah.
By and large, intentional and unintentional, we have become a religious hierarchy that has created, fostered, and sustained a culture of control and dependence on men rather than on freedom. We have seen almost all criticism of the movement to be sinful. We accuse people of having bad hearts or bad attitudes or independent spirits, when very often they have every right to feel as they do. When does anyone leave the church? They are automatically categorized as fall away. But why? Many have left because of conscience issues or harsh treatment, or from feeling trapped and guilty by the way they've been led. And here's the point I wanted to get to, and then I'll stop reading points from this letter. Through our discipleship partner theology, we have attempted, like modern-day Pharisees, to put a hedge around God's law. In trying to protect or control the Christians, we have routinely violated their liberty in Christ. And one last point, because I said last point.
Right.
Our lack of autonomy and freedom has blunted our thinking. There is very little thinking outside the box in the ICOC in terms of diversity and leadership structure, women's role in ministry, the collection of contribution, and even our teachings, e.g. the official studies. All of this contributes to the control of our members and ministry staff, a putting out of the Spirit's fire. This man had a come to Jesus moment.
He did. Yep.
And this was in 2003. This was when the whole thing with Kip was coming to a head.
Down. Yep.
And this caused a lot of church leaders to really sit back and think, what?
Right.
And they kind of got more of their autonomy through that. This is when things kind of fell apart for the ICOC, and when some congregations repented of their sins and started working on changing their ways. Now, let's talk about changing their ways just a little bit, and we'll move on from that. As you mentioned earlier, they went from having the central leader to being more decentralized. And different congregations changed their ways, some more and some less. This kind of reminds me of other denominations. A denomination I'm very familiar with is the Southern Baptist. The Southern Baptist is well known for having preached sin for many years and aligned with concepts like slavery and things in the past.
Right.
And I know I'm going to get some comments and some criticism of that, but go read your history. It's nothing that's hidden. Okay.
Right.
And nothing that the Southern Baptists try to hide. It's well known that some previous Southern Baptist leaders were very much in support of slavery and tried to use scripture to support it, which was always ridiculous. And yet a history of slavery and history of racism in the Southern Baptist culture and denomination. Now, I'm talking about a different group here, but this is a group that I'm more familiar with.
Yeah.
Has taken, 100 years to come out of some of those congregations, which is a long time.
Yep.
I know just a few years ago when the little church, the multi-ethnic Southern Baptist church we were members of, they had invited our preacher to come preach. And this another Southern Baptist church invited our preacher to come preach. Yep. And that was a real common thing. We traveled around to a lot of churches, and he would preach and the band would play and we'd visit and have a good old time. Well, they wanted him to come preach, but whenever they learned he was going to bring most of his congregation with him, they told him they didn't want his congregation there.
Right.
They were okay with him coming preaching. They didn't want his congregation. They were afraid of the color of their skin, you know? And this was in the 2020s, you know, or 2010s. Racism still exists there. Is it prominent? No. Not like it once was, and it's not taught from the top and all that.
Right.
That doesn't mean it doesn't exist in some of the congregations still.
Yep.
That's a nasty, ugly fact.
It existed in the congregation that I came from. It was everything I could do to serve in the neighborhood that our church was in because of the demographic makeup of the area. It was a lot.
So your church was in a primarily minority area.
Yep.
But your church's demographic was not primarily is not representative of the neighborhood.
Right. Yep. And trying to get them to actually get out in the neighborhood and do anything was it was hard.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but I have to mention racism comes in many levels and many levels of deception. It's because it's a sin, and that's how sin works, y'all.
That's right.
Sin is deep. So, anyways, back to the ICOC and them trying to repent from their sins of the control, the really presenting scripture badly and wrong, really ruining some people's lives, covering up of abuses. So one of the things that the listeners share with us is they really wanted us to know that, listen, the ICOC is not the same as the ICC.
Right.
That Kip went on, and he's still leading that other thing, but the ICOC's repented of their sins. And in a lot of congregations, that's absolutely the case.
That's a good way to put it. I was going to say is repenting of their sins.
There you go. Repenting of the sins.
Yep.
Because it's a process. When you've been doing something the same way a long time, it takes a while to do that. Now, I'm not trying to completely cover up for them, or, not cover up, take their side. Right. There's some things I think that sometimes you need to rip the Band-Aid off and stop sinning. Look, when we talk about, Saul becoming Paul, he didn't go back and just stone a few Christians on the weekends till he knocked the habit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, this was a literal come to Jesus, I'm blind, now I see moment. And sometimes that's what's required of us. So I think it's valid criticism. I've heard former ICOC members who criticize the current ICOC for not doing enough, for not coming forward enough and repenting of their sins publicly. One point that the listener had pointed out, and it was that they had themselves asked some of the leadership very recently, why not, if we're different now, why not, and I'm paraphrasing here, why not give up the name ICOC? Why not change the name? Because that's not who we are.
Yep.
And
remove that stigma.
Yeah. And they were responded to that a lot of leaders thought that would be like, that wouldn't be the right thing to do, that they should admit to it. This is who we used to be. True. And not trying to be someone else. And I think that's a common thing in the religious world. Again, I will go back to the Southern Baptists that I'm familiar with. There's a lot of Southern Baptist churches that knock Baptists off the name because they don't want the stigma of it, and definitely knock Southern Baptists off the name. It used to be most Southern Baptist churches had SBC in the logo in the world there. And I see things to be prideful of that. Like, not that pride is good, I guess, but you know what I mean? We should take pride in that logo and SBC and the North American Mission Board. Now, the North Mission Board has done some great work, but there are people who also have some hurt and some shame with that. So some churches have kind of, to be more opening, don't display that anymore. So I kind of respect somebody who owns up to it and says, look, that's who we used to be. This isn't who we are. But I do know that there's some very valid criticism from some current, or for some ex-members of ICOC, who are like, look, they haven't done enough. Right. And some of the ICOC congregations have dropped ICOC from their name, but still follow the same discipleship practices and harmful leadership practices that have hurt people.
Well, you also have to be careful, right? Looking at those former members that say they haven't done enough, and question, are those former members now expecting them to ordain gay priests, right? Or are they just saying they're still doing discipleship poorly, right? How far is not far enough, right? So I'm one of those that I'm very cautious when an ex-member of something says they didn't do what I wanted them to do, because what is it that you wanted them to do, right? You didn't stick around enough to help them change, so did you really try, or did you see that wasn't where you wanted to be to begin with?
And I see your point, but it's that's one of those slippery slopes,
right?
So you put in a little thing there, but you didn't stick around enough to help them change. Sometimes, that's a very valid criticism, and sometimes that's like, well, of course they couldn't stick around; they were being sexually abused,
right? Absolutely, yeah. There's that.
It's
line,
a slippery
right?
slope. Well, there is, and this is not a super large group at the moment, although kind of a large group, one of the larger groups we've talked about, and definitely a large group of ex-members because they churn a lot of people. Some were in a couple of weeks and some were in many years, Right. So I find it hard to go as far as you went there, but I see your point because it's just such a real slippery slope before you're victim shaming,
right?
Yep. But on the other hand, we don't know everything. So I get that. I can tell you this. There have been other people who've come out since Kip left and they became more decentralized and have had more recent issues with the ICOC.
Right. Yep.
For one, the Los Angeles church had a whole problem come up in 2014. And they had brought in somebody to help them kind of look at the problem, which is that's a good thing. They brought in somebody to help them, how do we get over this? But in looking at it, it was very obvious that the sins of the past were still problems they were having.
Still there. Right.
Yeah. They were using they basically were using these tactics of gaming up on other people in leadership, and spreading around rumors about them to try to discredit other people and things. So my point is they're still having trouble even in 2014, which was 10 years later. Right.
Right.
And then Orange County, which is, very close to LA there. The church in Orange County had problems in 2016 and actually ended up ousting some people over it. And there was a whole bunch of back and forth, and reading through some of the issues that they were having in 2016, they were still using the whole discipleship thing. And part of the problems they had with this person is that they weren't going to their discipler enough.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still using that same stuff, and they're saying we're rejecting this, but it's the same teaching.
Right.
So that makes me think that there's still some problems around. Now, I won't keep harping on that, but I wanted to bring that up. We've kind of seen, different viewpoints on that. Something else I did want to bring up. So as we talked about, Kip left the ICOC and he started the ICC, and he kind of replicated everything he had done before. And this one's for you, Bryan, because I know how much this fake college stuff really bothers you.
Oh dear. More fake colleges.
So we know there was a fake college, right? The International College of Christian Ministries.
Right.
So Kip put himself as the head of this college.
Of course. Yep.
And his family and some other leadership as the head. But here's the problem. Kip only had a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
So he founded the college, and upon founding the college, gave himself a master's degree and a doctorate. You can go on their website. You can find pictures of him dressed up in his whole doctorate garb.
Okay.
Listen to this quote from the ICC. To found a college with the European degree system, there must be at its head an individual holding the doctorate degree. Therefore, today, Thomas W. Kip McKean II will be awarded the doctorate degree, doctorate in ministry, for his years of preaching, teaching, training, and building churches around the world. This is not to mention his widespread writings as a scholar and theologian. His formal training and experiences at University of Florida in speech communications, high honors, as well as Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary and the Harding Graduate School of Religion, have enriched his leadership. Kip humbly serves as the president of the International College of Christian Ministries. Now, he doesn't mention there that he was also giving himself a master's, but if you go look up his credentials, he got a master's from ICCM as well as a doctorate upon founding ICCM. So he did nothing for it. He's quite clear about it.
So what you're saying is I need to found a college and then I can be Dr. Garrison. Perfect.
Absolutely. And you know what? Most people will never question you.
Right. Yep.
So you might as well be Dr. Garrison.
That's right.
Doctor to the third power, Garrison.
Nice. That's
actually, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Right.
And then when people write your name as Dr. Garrison when you go places, go write in the little 3 and tell them they got it wrong.
Yep. Add the cube. That's fun.
So this just goes again on our list of colleges that and look, I totally get, I've made this argument in previous episodes. Not every college is going to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think every college has to be completely accredited. The accreditation system is okay, whatever. But come on, we got to have some sort of standards here.
Right. Well, having degrees that I worked really hard for, having that accreditation, I think is important, right? It shows people that you as a college are serious about education and learning and teaching.
There are people who make the argument that the accreditations are ruled by people who maybe don't care about some things as much as others, and that some religious schools are accredited in different ways than others. There is no one. Well, let's say this: there is no one accreditation body,
right?
For one, there are multiple levels of accreditations. There are some kind of state level and regional areas that accreditate, and there's some national accreditations. There is no one accreditation body, and there's a reason for that because they don't agree on what the accreditation is.
Right. Yeah, but still, right? You have, the ICCM and what's his name's school, the not Enlightenment school.
That was the one where you sleep on a verse and you
sleep on the verse. Yeah. What was
your lesson for the day?
Scrolling through. I can't find it. But Embassy University. There
Embassy,
it is.
Yes.
Right. But, so anyone can say that something is a college or a university, but that's a good way to take people's money.
Yep. Well, and especially if even to use the Bible study app, you got to pay an annual fee that goes to the scholarships.
Right. Like I can grab a Bible and a book and I can do my own Bible study.
But they teach that, they're the only true source or the only true church.
Yep.
So listen, we're nearing the end here. I want to wrap up. There's a couple more things I wanted to point out real quick. One, some of the information I found here came from exploringicc.org.
Okay.
And the reason I don't always point out all of our sources, I know you link a lot of them when you do the write-ups later.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I want to point this one out, this was founded by this guy named Kit in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, KIT, not Kip.
KIT, yeah, Kit, right. Not Kip. Kit like the car, the cool car. But the reason this is interesting to me is because he writes on there just a little brief thing of his story that basically he's on a college campus there in Sydney and he keeps coming across these ICC people who are trying to convert him.
Right.
And he ain't about to be converted. He appears to love the Lord. And he thinks they're full of it. He thinks they're very nice people. And he says they've always been super polite to him. He doesn't hold anything like that against them. And he tries to tell them on the website, I'm not here to persecute you, but I want to point out these things that are biblically wrong. Mm-hmm. And so he made this whole website, exploringicc.org, that talks about that. And so some of the things we've talked about in this, I've gotten from that website. I think you ought to check that website out. That's very very interesting, I thought.
Nice. I'm sure it's entertaining.
So, anyways, we've talked about most of the other social issues. It's all about control with this group.
Right.
All about control. Look, y'all, Jesus came to save souls, but Jesus came to bring us freedom. You've heard the term freedom in Christ. Okay, not to lock us down to things. If you're part of a group that wants to control everything you think, say, and do, it might be a cult.
It might be a cult.